This is a problem. This is a headline from Sports Illustrated. Maybe you've heard of that outlet. And it says, the college football world, that's you, that's me, the college football world was stunned by Oregon's blowout win over Colorado. A 3-touchdown favorite won a football game handedly. And you were stunned. I was stunned. We weren't stunned. No, we weren't. This is the Deion tax. Those of you who thought I sounded like an idiot last week when I introduced you to the Deion tax were coming in droves to me yesterday in the DMs and saying, wait a second, you were right about this whole Deion tax. The word hater, the word overrated, overhyped, disrespect, I think we need to hit timeout on the use of every one of these words until, as a collective, we learn the definitions of these words. Because a lot of you are throwing out the word hater to describe things that are not hate at all. If I do not root for the same thing you root for, that is not hate. That's just called competition. That's just called entertainment. So, against the backdrop of all this, we had a football game. Oregon, as predicted, rolls Colorado 42-6. It shouldn't have been close. It wasn't close. The same things win in this game that have always won. Now, there are different ways to dress it up. But if you're going to get dominated and overwhelmed at the line of scrimmage to the degree Colorado did yesterday, you will lose 10 times out of 10. There's really no fluctuation there. It's quite beautiful in the brutal simplicity of it all. Colorado never had a shot in this game. They never would have a shot in this game. That includes with Travis Hunter inserted into the lineup. Now, I need to pause, and I need to let you know, because if you're new to our show, it may sound like I'm coming at it from an anti-Buffs point of view. I'm not at all. I'm a massive fan of what Deion's done. What I'm not a massive fan of is this group of folks in my profession. I try not to be one, but there's this group of folks, this little cabal, if you will, of people who know that it's in their best financial interest to generate hype. And that's okay, because we profit off that here as well. I've done a ton of Deion videos. But the difference is, there's real money to be made in pumping enough air into a balloon that it pops and then making fun of the balloon for popping because you benefit going and coming. You benefit both ways. You see how that works? I overinflate the expectation level for a team. I overhype a team because I have a massive platform to do it. Then they go bust based on my falsely inflated expectation for them, and then I call them a bust and I call them fraudulent instead of referring to myself as a fraud. I saw this all over the country yesterday, and it angers me because there's no room for a nuance-based conversation. The nuance-based conversation should sound something like this. Oregon's a top 10 team. Colorado has no business competing with them this year. Even as the season started off in an unexpected win against TCU and Nebraska, there still was coming a time where they were badly outmanned at the line of scrimmage, and this was never going to be a competitive game. It wasn't. And it wouldn't be if they played it again next week or the next week or the next week. But what happened, you saw Dan Lanning get real fired up about it. What happened is there was a lot of talk coming from Deion's camp. I'm not saying they don't run their mouth out there. I never minded. As long as you're going to play folks on the field, I don't mind. You say whatever you want to. I think a lot of the animosity and a lot of the wild, just like casual, out-of-this-world takes yesterday were from drive-bys who don't really know anything about this sport, but they know Deion Sanders, and so they just started to run their mouths, a.k.a. the Deion tax, the prime tax, if you will. And then others are just people who want to generate controversy because they don't know anything about football, but they do know this stuff sells. They know that sells, and so they can win in that market. There were padlock stats everywhere in this game. Padlock stats all over the place. Oregon had more first downs than Colorado had total yards in the first half. That is a padlock stat. Shedeur Sanders had 159 yards passing. Now, knowing the style of ball they play at Colorado, we knew Shedeur had to go off. He had to absolutely go off, and that's not going off because they were not going to run the ball effectively. And Oregon had touchdowns on 6 of their first 7 drives. Those were the padlock stats. If I tell you that Friday, you probably don't even need to watch this game. But I don't want to say I told you so because that's played. That's old. But again, I know we get a lot of new traffic on the Colorado videos. So I want to tell you, you saw a lot of stupid things said yesterday. You probably heard a lot of stupid things. I hope you didn't participate in it on either side of this. But Colin, let's dial it up. And just for the sake of memory, let's go back to last week. I don't know when it's going to happen, whether it's this week against Oregon or next week against USC, but whenever someone does get a good piece of Colorado, you know what's coming. It's going to be so dumb. Some of the conversation is going to be so stupid. You're going to have a bunch of folks saying, I told you so, about Colorado losing a football game when they were supposed to lose, what was the count, 9 of them or 10 of them, according to Vegas? Yeah, shocker if they do lose Saturday. They lost to a top 10 team. Shocker. And here we are. Colorado lost to a top 10 team. Shocker. No, actually, I think the word was stunning in the headline. Fraudulent, that's a word I actually saw yesterday by an esteemed member of the college football media to describe Colorado. Overrated and overhyped, I saw a ton. We call this the recalibration of expectation on this show. I just described it to you. It is people who have really no other ability than to create controversy, and they get to define who you are. Like, that's the entire way that this world works in college football, up to and including ranking systems. That's why I stay away from rankings, and I only do power ratings. They rank you wherever they feel like ranking you, and then when you don't live up to their expectation, they get to call you the failure. What a foolproof system that is. How does anyone ever get fired? How does anyone ever lose their job in this profession? I don't know. So Dan Lanning went nuclear yesterday. Before the game, during the game, after the game, he went nuclear. And I told you guys in March, and I reiterated it in summer and in fall camp, I knew a lot of coaches didn't really care for Deion Sanders. It didn't bother me because I like Deion Sanders, but if I was a coach, maybe I'd feel a different way about him. This is not a Taylor Swift song. It is not a Disney movie. You don't just get to arrange things in a way that makes you feel good. This is competition at the highest level. These folks are after each other's throat. It's always that way behind the scenes. Deion's a lot more high profile, so when someone just publicly outs themselves as sort of having animosity and no love lost for the other side, maybe it catches your eye and ear a lot more because it pertains to Deion. But dude, Dan Lanning yesterday, when he goes off in that pregame speech and then they start blasting it all over the country, he wasn't saying anything several dozen other coaches don't feel right now. Now, here's the difference. Some people try and inject race into that, and I've dodged it, and I'll continue to dodge it because I think largely it's nonsense. I think there's probably a small sliver of that conversation that is fueled by people who just don't like Deion Sanders because of the color of his skin. I think there is a huge, like 95% chunk of that pie of people who don't like him, if they don't, for reasons that have nothing to do with the color of his skin. I had someone tell me the other day, they said, Josh, you know why I don't like Deion Sanders? I said, why is that? Because he reminds me of Johnny Manziel. And I said, do tell, although I knew where they were going with that. Little anecdote there, but it is possible to just have a guy who possesses characteristics you don't like. That is possible. But in the coaching industry, when you see what Deion's doing, and then you're going to face him, and I'm in my hotel Friday night, and I'm watching Lanning on SportsCenter, and he gets asked like 7 questions about Deion. I said, oh no, oh no. And then Saturday, there he is. It is like someone pulled the cord on Dan Lanning's back and they let that thing go. And finally, you kind of heard to Dan Lanning, some folks behind the scenes know. That's him. That's him. He's been really good up to this point in his career of handling himself in a way that is aesthetically pleasing from a strict PR perspective. But I'm not a fan of it. I'm a fan of raw. I'm a fan of you giving me whoever you are. Same reason I love Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is not produced, as we would say in our business, at all. You just get Deion Sanders. There's very little filter at all. I'd love it if every coach was like that because I don't get offended by anything. So I don't really care what anyone says as long, and this is the condition, as long as the folks you talk about, you have to play. As long as they're on your schedule. I don't want to hear Sam Pittman's thoughts on Deion Sanders right now because they're not going to play. But I have no problem hearing Deion's thoughts on Lanning, Lanning's thoughts on Deion. I got no problem with it. I kind of have no problem with any of it. No one got hurt yesterday by those words. Everybody's okay. Deion Sanders didn't seem fractionally as outraged about it as other people who have nothing to do with it did. It's kind of like a couple of weeks ago or last week when they played Colorado State. There were folks calling for the Colorado State safety to lose a scholarship, and Deion steps to the podium and says, no, he made a football play. He made an error in judgment. He got flagged for it. We forgive him. Travis Hunter forgives him. We should move on. No, get him. Why are you more outraged than he is? Same thing yesterday. Football game happened. Colorado got splattered. Deion Sanders said, we got to learn from it. We got to get back to work. Dan Lanning was all fired up. That's it. That's competition. That's what it is. And I'm looking over here on this iJosh, and I got folks fired up like they had skin in the game. You don't have more skin in the game than either of them do. So I don't know what Dan Lanning will sound like Monday at his press conference. I wouldn't be apologetic for anything. I'd do the same thing Ryan Day does. I'd walk in my locker room, and if those dudes were receptive to my message, I couldn't care less what anyone thinks outside my locker room. Burn the bridge. Burn the bridge. Some of these folks who you kind of seek affirmation from, you don't need. You don't need. At the end of the day, an upset sports writer or an upset television commentary or host, it's just that. It's an upset writer or an upset host. They have nothing to do with whether you win or lose a game. As for the Pac-12 right now, it's insane. It's competitive out there. The season is long. We're not even in October yet. We're not even through September yet. And it feels like the Colorado story has already gone 57 different directions. But we got Utah, who I'll talk about later, in the thick of it. We got Southern Cal, we got Oregon, Washington. Washington State kind of stunned me last night. I'll talk about them later too. UCLA, I think, will still make some noise. Oregon State is in this thing. It is such a deep conference right now. And I wonder if in a month and a half, some teams have separated themselves or if it still just looks that competitively balanced. Because the odds right now to win that conference, we still got 4 teams plus 600 or better. And that's USC, Oregon, Washington, and Utah. It's an amazing conference to watch right now. So that's how I feel about that currently. Like I also have learned this. I have learned it's kind of impossible to talk about Colorado or Deion Sanders and expect everyone to actually listen to what you said. Because it's not going to happen. People are going to hear about 2 or 3 words into your first sentence, and then they're just going to start typing. So I expect that in the comment section. And quite frankly, maybe I even welcome it.